Welcome to the AMAI. And I said it right on the first time.
You got it right. You got it right. AMAI. There we go. Well done. The we're talking about
Why don't you share it real quick? Share the image.
oh yeah. Yeah, let's just share that real quick here. If I can figure out how to share my screen, there it is. Okay, so let me get that up. So this is an image that I found shared on the R Singularity subreddit on Reddit, which if you're not a member of, if you don't check that subreddit out, it's pretty good. They tend to keep up a lot. Now, this is a group that's really optimistic, right, about Singularity and about what's going on. Oh, my alarm's going off. That's my
Wake up.
Do not miss this recording alarm. And so I saw this, which is Howie Zoo. Is that how you would chew? I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce chew, but anyway, at Y Combinator, Winter 24 kickoff today. So that's their cohort that just started for the kind of winter spring cohort. Kickoff today. Sam Altman suggested people build with the mindset that GPT-5 and AGI will be achieved, quote, relatively soon. Most GPT-4 limitations will get fixed in GPT-5 per YC founder Richard Hay.
And for those who don't know, Sam Altman used to run Y Combinator before he became the CEO of a little company called OpenAI, which is behind ChatGPT. So he is very ingrained at Y Combinator. His words are like gospel to begin with. And then also he might be the most successful CEO of all time. And I know that's like a crazy statement, but I'm not sure if OpenAI would have been on the same trajectory if he wasn't there. So on that note, I sent you another link in my morning dump from Microsoft. And before we get to the boring parts of processing videos, we maybe do at least 15 minutes where we record shit. You might want to take a quick look at that video. And I've seen it, so I'll let you share and let you experience that for the first time with other people watching it.
Sounds good. And then we will talk about the AGI question, because I want to talk about the AGI question because I think it's an interesting one. So let's look at this real quick here, though, and see what we have.
Believe it or not, this is a fantastic transition into AGI. So while he's doing this is Retail Media Creative Studio powered by Generative AI. Okay, so what does that mean? That means Microsoft's trying to make it easier for you to generate ads. So we'll instead of reading the article, we'll just click play on the video. And we'll turn the volume off because frankly we don't
creativity with Retail Media Creative Studio.
Yeah, I'll turn that down.
And then you can maybe double the speed or something. And then while it's going, so the idea is that you copy a link.
Oh, I don't think you can.
Oh,
quality and share. That's all I get.
That's awful. So anyway, you pick a link for your product if you have an e-commerce store, and you paste the link, and then you tell it the type of ad style you want it to create, and it's going to create a set of creatives for you after reading and analyzing the page and picking your style. And it's going to go ahead and do the whole thing. So this, as I said to Justin, is actually a fantastic transition to AGI. So AGI, or artificial general intelligence, is actually the opposite of what we're doing here. These are hyper-specific, hyper-trained on a singular task. And that's what they're doing. So this is saying, go take a look at an e-commerce page, pick a style, and then generate a set of creatives. That's not general intelligence. That is a specific intelligence and a specific AI. The AGI comment that Justin just pulled up means that the AI is like a human. It can learn how to do tasks. It can experiment on its own, and it can figure out what the next steps are and do them without intervention. Now, early on, we all know that employees make a lot of mistakes if you're not training them and if yourself. And the same thing will happen with the AGI. But the point is, you can actually assign an AGI a task without explicit instructions. And it can do the research, it can learn, it can grow, and then it can perform that task. And that is So damn scary.
Yeah. And so a lot of what we're talking about there with AGI and the question about like what is the definition of AGI, right? Because I think there's a lot of slack in that definition. And so that's something worth discussing. But one thing that I think is interesting to discuss is autonomy necessarily a quality of AGI? I don't know. Is it?
Fair. It is in my definition, because otherwise it might as well just be an LLM, right?
Right.
An artificial general intelligence is supposed to, the intention of an AGI system is to perform any task that a human being is capable of. That is the definition according to techtarget.com that I just pulled up here.
So the question is then, the question that you posed to me right before we flipped the recording on is, how much would you pay for AGI? How much would you pay every month to have AGI? So let's talk about that for a second. Let's go down that little rabbit hole. Let's assume for a second that what we're talking about is something that is able to be pretty much fully autonomous, right? So it can access tools, it can use the tools, it can decide what tools it needs, it can complete tasks, it can check in with me and keep me in the loop and then wait on my response automatically until I respond and then continue its task, right? Just like a person would. Assuming an autonomous AGI agent like that, it's worth a lot.
No shit.
It's
No
worth
shit.
So
like,
ton of money.
The thing is, I would easily say, hey, it's worth $1,500 a month, right? And I would say,
yeah,
right, okay. But the question I would have to you then is, all right, you can hire a full-time person for $1,500 a month if you use external contractors. So why haven't you done it already? And
I don't know that I would pay $1,500 a month in my personal life because I don't know how many tasks. I've never had to audit it, right? But I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, here's a dumb one. Hey, AGI. Hey, agent. Every Sunday by 2:00, I need a meal plan for the week. And these are the things I like and the things that I don't. I want you to run it by me, and I'll tell you what I don't like. I want you to swap it out. I want you to also then create the Walmart order to pick everything up. If it could do that kind of thing, right? Then you can start to see where it starts to like really lift a lot of the menial labor off of your plate.
And again, what you just described is something 100% a VA could do for you, right? And so anyway, what I'm finding interesting is I know my answer on why I haven't hired a VA versus a bot. I know my answer, and my answer is actually has to do with 3 different things.
Okay.
One, it's that the VA is still human, and yeah, you might get them for 40 hours a week, but you won't get them for 24 times 30, right? Which you would get with the bot, which is a very different experience, right? Instead of 40 hours a week, it's 3 people working 8-hour shifts.
Yeah, you get
5 days a week plus the weekend, right?
Yeah, you get at least 3x the productivity.
It at least, right? Then there's the idea of training. I would prefer to train a computer that I could essentially own and run forever versus a person who I would be training to essentially probably leave if I train them well enough, because they should be earning more if I've trained them, and yet I don't want to pay more. So that's always been a hurdle in my mind in terms of hiring VAs for like $1,500 internationally. And then the third one, and this is probably the most important one, is security. I know the AI seemed less secure, but most security risks actually happen by people giving other people their passwords or by having papers with sticky notes with your passwords on it and that kind of thing.
Yep.
I don't like the idea of another person having access to all of my things.
Yep.
and I would have less concern having an AI have access to all of my things. So having an AI read all my emails, delete the spam, give me daily summaries, shit. Like my own RSS reader takes me an hour a day to read. Read that every day. Tell me what was important versus not important. Give me the weekly summary. I read about someone who did it with the VA, and every day they get an image texted to them with their agenda for the day, their top priorities, an inspirational quote based upon the day and their personality type and what they have to do to try to help them get through the day, and then what the meal plan should have been. All like boom, every morning they get that, and he called it his executive briefing, like the president gets every day. And he has his VA do his executive briefing every night and send it to him first thing in the morning. And he goes, it just changes. I just don't have to think about things. Like everything's taken care of for me.
Yep.
So my mental facilities can be focused on what's important. And obviously we've all heard about decision fatigue and that kind of things. So that's the reason why for me, I probably would be willing to spend, maybe not right now, but when I have a couple more clients coming in, I would be able to spend and willing to spend and probably desire to spend $1,500 a month because it would give me the capacity to do more in a way that just isn't possible. But what's interesting is, what would you do if you were an employee somewhere? Would you hire an AGI to replace you and take that job and do that job for you? And that just becomes infinitely more interesting because we've already talked about, like you and I have talked about, at least I don't think we've talked about in the show, people having 3 or 4 jobs in the remote environment, right? Well, if you've trained an AGI to respond like you, to act like you, and to essentially be you, what's stopping you from having 3 or 4 jobs?
Well, and also, do you have 3 or 4 jobs, or does the AGI have 3 or 4 jobs for which you founded the jobs and you organized all of the stuff around it, right? Like, who has the job here?
Okay, so perfect example. Applying for jobs actually sucks, right? So imagine training an AGI and saying, look, this is everything about me. Here's my resume, everything else. And yes, I know there are bots that will do this, but they're dumb bots. But training an AGI and saying, okay, now knowing everything you know about me and knowing everything about my resume, and then I want you to do deep research on this company and then answer every question in a deep and meaningful way and write a killer cover letter and apply. You could literally have somebody out there 24/7 applying for jobs, but not like just spamming and hitting easy apply and being done. No, going in to the nines and applying and making it like you spent a week worth of research and doing it day in and day out. They could probably find themselves 20 jobs and then do the work for you, right? Like, holy cow, if people, AGI is mind boggling.
Well, and not only that, right? Because if you start to think about AGI and you start to think about, well, if it can act autonomously as, at the baseline of an average human, if you will, and often better than that, then you can think about the non-traditional or ancillary things that come around with what you just talked about. So let's take the job hunt thing for a second, right? So yes, AGI can go find the jobs, can apply for the jobs, can write the cover letters, can write the resume, can submit it, can monitor the email, can respond as things come back in, all of that kind of stuff, right? So it can handle that process. But the other thing it can also do is it can go onto LinkedIn and it can make connections with the right people and it can send them the right messages and it can drip emails to them at the right time. And it can do all these other background tasks that are involved in sort of the extra over and above just applying for a job, but all the extra stuff that kind of makes you the top 1% of candidates, basically. It could do all of that automatically too, right? In theory, I mean, that's my understanding of AGI. That's what I would expect. And so, yeah, we get into a crazy situation here. Where you could basically stack jobs up. And so now essentially we are then just intermediaries. I mean, then you would argue, like, what is the point of having the human in the loop at all there, aside from just being an artifact of it's slow for everybody to kind of jump on this train? But
100%.
you are essentially a talent agent for AGI at that point.
100%. And you pulled it out. There is no reason to have the human in the middle. The only reason to have the human in the middle is if they're training the AGI to function like they would, and if they have specific skills, right?
Yep.
That's step one, or communication patterns. That's one. And then step two is, and more realistically, most organizations are slow to adapt. And so this is just people arbitraging the technology to their own advantage.
Yep.
And I think it will happen. It's not a question of if, like, it will happen.
It absolutely will happen. And within the next few years.
Well,
maybe this year.
I was gonna say maybe this year. Justin and I, privately, we talk every day about AI. Shocker. And one of the things I said is, like, when do you think AGI will happen? What was your answer?
I said 2027.
Yeah. And what did I say? 2027. Yeah,
yep.
Exactly. Yep. So, and to get, like, just from a logic perspective, that's a crazy quick turnaround compared to, like, from LLMs to AGI. I thought we were being hyper aggressive.
It's already very aggressive. Absolutely.
And now we're talking about, like, 2024.
No, I mean, if that happens, right? Like, yeah, it's just.
Okay, so here's the thing. I don't want to talk about politics in this show, but ever. But imagine AGI coming out before the election.
Yeah. I mean, this is
it will become the only thing that matters in the voting.
It will have a very strong influence for sure. But the problem is not enough people know about it, right? Like, this is not something that most people have even on their radar. And so most people won't be talking about it. But here's the thing. It puts a lot more weight on the election, right? And it's going to make the election potentially very interesting just in terms of all the shit that happens around the election. Having AGI in the mix is a wild card like we've never seen in politics.
Yeah. Just so we're clear, the reason I think this matters, everyone, is AGI will replace 90% of knowledge workers. If your job is processing data, there is no reason for your job. If your only job
data, for sure, you're done. You are done-ski if your job is processing data.
And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because, and Barack Obama did that. His administration did a big report, and they said, I think 40% of jobs were at risk, right? In that report, that was with, like, immature, not AGI level stuff, right? So if you think
that wasn't even with LLMs, that was with basic NLP, basic machine learning, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And by the way, like, every major company has been investing in these systems for the last 10, 15 years because it's, hey, a group of 10 people can replace a group of 1,000, right? Like, that's the level of magnitude with specific AI, not generative. Too many G's here. Generative, general. No, with general, like, AI, right? Like, it's a whole different ballgame. And so if 50% of jobs are done, the whole structure of the government has to change.
The whole
society.
This is the thing, and this is what we talked about last week, right? And so this tweet that I hope is accurate and true, and does indicate that this is going to be a very interesting year, proves the point that we made last year and that we will continue to make, which is that we as the human species, our minds are not really adequately prepared to deal with the level of acceleration that we're going to see here. We just assume that this is going to follow this steady, trotting, linear path. And I think what we may already be seeing is that it's accelerating faster than we even potentially could have imagined it's accelerating, right? It's very difficult for your head to get around. You're trying to like grab onto an exponential curve. Very, very difficult to like feel that and like believe that, you know? But if this happens this year, I think you got to look back at it and you got to go, the rate of acceleration is, and then it only gets faster from there, right? That's the really kind of like grounding, chilling kind of aspect to it, which is, could this be going faster than anybody even thought it could have?
I'm reminded of a quote I think you shared one time about how it takes millions of dollars to train one of these models, and lots of comp cycles and electricity and everything else. And yet, like, the human mind is able to convert, waste products and byproducts, essentially food,
A bag of chips.
into complex thinking. And it's mind-bogglingly efficient.
Yes.
But the problem with that is it only appears efficient when you realize that it's one bag of chips to train one person for a day. Now you talk about having to train the world, and it's 7 billion bags of chips to train 7 billion people for that day. That's where computers win, because they never have to be taught again.
Right. You don't have to keep, right. Now, you do have to keep fueling it, because
you have to keep fueling it, but every day they're getting better. Like the human cycle, I read this fantastic analysis, and it was like, it takes 20 years, 0 to 20. And then it takes to get someone into trained into society, right? And then they have 10 years where they learn a specialty. And then they're typically, it's around that time period where they make the most scientific advancements. Okay. And then they might function for another 30 years. So it's 30 years of work to train somebody to potentially be productive for 30 years. And then everything they've learned has to be retrained to somebody else. And that's gone forever, because as soon as that 30 years of knowledge existed, the computer has it. And so
you don't get generation loss.
You don't get generational loss, and you only get better. And so we talk about medical AI, right? Where it's like medical imaging diagnostics is already better with AI than it is with people. It already is. The thing is, it's only going to get better. But one of the interesting things is like, okay, there are how many medical journals published every year? How many would you think?
God, there's got to be 10,000.
Many
individual articles?
Yeah.
Got to be, right? 10,000.
Oh, you are so low. I don't.
Really?
More than 1.8 million articles every year.
1.8 million a year?
Yes. So,
my Lord, that's a staggering. So keep going.
You know where?
Yeah, I know where you're going. Please.
No medical doctor can read 1.8 million articles per year.
Yeah.
Every AI can.
Yeah.
And so, as part of that, one of those, the recent studies about medical diagnostics and scanning, what they were finding was that the computer was always better than the human. When I say always, okay, 99 point whatever percent. It was better than the human. However, it might have only been like 5%. Still better, but only a small margin. On rare cases, it was 30% to hundreds of percent, like just infinitely better, because the doctors were unlikely to have seen the rare cases or read the articles about the rare cases. But the computer had, and it was exposed to it. So 1.8 million articles a year times 10 years, right? 18 million articles. 18 million articles. By the way, it's fallacious, because the quantity of information created every year increases pretty dramatically. So instead of 18 million, it's probably going to be 50 million at the end of 10 years, right? Because data increases.
And again, everything accelerates.
So 50 million articles fed to an AI over a 10-year period, and you're going to have, like, the whole medical industry is going to change. Everything is going to, I'm so excited.
Crazy. So, and there's a concept, actually. Have you heard of Are you familiar with LEV, longevity escape velocity?
Um,
So this is something that's talked about in the longevity communities. And the idea behind LEV, longevity escape velocity, is that longevity escape velocity is where you get to the point where you have lived to the point where you're now likely to live for as long as you want, because the advances will keep getting faster, then it's likely that you will die of the things that are unsolved, right? Basically. So once you get to that point in the acceleration curve, you've kind of reached, you're like in the club, right? Like you made it. Like you are now, unless you get hit by a fucking car or something, obviously, right? But of dying of natural causes like cancer, disease, that kind of thing. That's what this is about. And more people think that in the next decade we get to that point.
well, I actually, there was a fantastic article 4 or 5 years ago, and it said the first person to live to 200 has already been born. And it was like the New York Times.
I think that's probably true. I think that's it kind of has to be true.
Okay, so now this is where we talk about the exponential nature and how dangerous that is, right? So let's say we have 7 billion people on the planet, and now they all live twice as long. And so we have twice as many mouths to feed, and we have twice as many people to clothe and take care of.
Yep.
Now we have a tenth of the jobs that we currently have because AI takes the rest of them. Yep. How the hell does society function? And yes, this is a doom and gloom kind of conversation, but it's also so much fun to think about. But you know, it's only fun to think about because we're not actually in positions of power. If I was in politics, I'd be scared shitless right now. The good news is I kind of have an ego, right? And I know this is a shock to you. I kind of have an ego, and I don't want to do something unless I feel like I can potentially be the best. Well, I was not born in the United States, so I'll never be president. So I'm going to stay out of politics. No, but I mean, it's crazy. It's great. I would be petrified if I was in office right now.
I would also be. I
mean, I'm petrified for my family. I couldn't imagine being like truly responsible for society.
No, not at all. And I think though, in the thought experiment, what's interesting, right, is the thought experiment that yes, the population starts to explode at a rate that is, we would call in today's standards, not sustainable. But in a world where this is happening, and if Sam Altman is right, which I tend to believe he's probably at least on the right track, and in another decade, the marginal cost of producing energy goes to near zero, then what is the problem?
So first of all, I am a believer in technology. I mean, obviously we have this series on AI, but I am a believer in technology. And I've had this conversation with plenty of different people, family and friends, and that throughout society, they always said, oh, if we expand this much more, society will collapse. It has happened 100 times, right? Like 1,000 times, whatever. It's like, oh, we can't possibly deal with this many people or this next level thing. And technology's always solved the problem. Technology brings about, the aqueducts in Rome so that you can deal with growing population in the city, so you can have clean water and remove waste. It deals with, improvements in agriculture and everything. Logistics improves. So technology finds a way. And when I say technology, it's people, but people using...
That's very Malcolm of you in Jurassic Park. Technology finds a way.
Yeah, technology does find a way, and people find a way through technology to improve and deal with things, right? Mega cities are going to have to happen, right?
Because if you think about it, go down the trail here. Let's think about what are the actual problems with a population that starts to grow exponentially faster in an uncapped kind of way. Everybody's living for hundreds of years now, right? What are the actual problems? Well, there are obvious ones like resources, like food. Let's take food for a second. Well, But let's pair this prediction, let's pair this thought experiment with also the idea that at that point at which we're talking, we also have the ability to produce energy. And energy is the important part here, because if energy is almost free, then everything else is basically almost free. Because the reason why things cost things is because it takes energy to create them. And so if energy is almost zero, it means that the cost of everything is almost zero. So that would mean, in theory, that the food problem is not a problem because we have abundance of food. We will be able to grow, manufacture, create whatever we want because there's unlimited energy and it almost costs nothing to create stuff, right? So food actually becomes not a problem. Water becomes
Not a problem.
interesting.
Not a problem. If you have unlimited energy, you can convert salt water to water.
You can convert salt water to water, and you can also transport water very easily, because again, transporting water, the only reason it's expensive is because it takes energy, right? So now water's not a problem, right?
Especially if it's a computer that's doing the driving, and like that, you got to shift everything.
Exactly. So what is the problem? The only problem I can think of is physical space. Physical space, meaning I am in this room and there's not 50 other people in this room because the world is not so populated that I only get a square foot of it, right? I get to have like a acre lot with a house on it, not really like a quarter acre lot, but whatever. So I have space, I have room. Well, as the population grows, you're literally taking up more and more space, right? Now, some of that can be, this is why we have high rises, right? We figured out how to deal with space and density before. That is not probably scalable in a comfortable way forever, right? So is physical space, the ability to like stand on a square of ground and not have to have somebody else standing on the same square of ground as you, is that the only limiting factor in this equation?
So probably, but that is so far away from being a concern that it's not even funny. And the reason I say that is population density is very interesting. But population density is like most of us, like 50% of us live in 20 cities in the US.
Right.
The other 50% take over the whole of the US.
It's very sparse. I mean, we have tons of room right now.
Tons of room. And by the way, like I am very, very interested in like architecture and those kinds of things. But the reality is it's more efficient to have one high rise than it is to have 400 single dwelling apartments or units.
Sure.
Right. It's better for the environment. It's actually better for cities. It's better for, you can argue whether or not it's better for people, but like it's actually better for culture and education and community building and all those kinds of things. Again, you can argue that some of that, but there is so much space in the world that is essentially underutilized or poorly utilized, where if you took the concept of New York City kind of development and you put it in Tampa, in Miami, and Miami has a little bit of it, it's nothing like New York, right? Like if you put it in, and we're only doing that because we're in Florida, but like Orlando has some high rises, nothing like New York City, right? Like if you collapsed everything in, you could end up with lots of parks like Central Park, right? You could have tons of those. You could do one of those every 30 blocks or something like that. And people would end up with probably more access to parks than they have today, as well as infrastructure and everything else. But what's interesting is how fast does society shift?
Right. And the other thing that like there's an underlying assumption here in this conversation that we actually haven't talked about, which is we're assuming the reproduction rate stays the same.
Which it hasn't. It's plummeted.
Which it's falling. We know that. It stands to reason that it will continue to fall as people live longer, because right now people are waiting longer and longer to have kids, right? People are waiting longer and longer in life to have kids. You have more and more people that are starting families in their 30s, some in their 40s now, whereas used to be as predominantly in the early 20s, mid 20s, right? So we've already seen this get pushed back in a world where now you're living a few hundred years because we've reached LEV. You might not have kids until you're 100.
Well, that's the question.
That's
So,
the equivalent of being in your 20s.
well, okay, so that is a very interesting question. Is do reproductive cycles increase as your longevity increases? And there's actually not any proof to prove that that's possible.
Meaning
males may be able to, but women are born with a finite number of eggs, and so menopause happens.
Right.
The menopause has a strict timeline.
But in a world where we can just mass produce eggs for you on demand that are custom to you, because we can now take.
All right. Now I don't like. I'm still somewhat religious.
I'm just saying this is where this is where this is going to go.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I will say today was supposed to be a publishing day and not a recording day, but it's just the announcement about AGI just made us too happy. And this has been a super fun conversation. What do you think? Should we stop it and like try to publish something today?
We probably should. Yeah.
We probably should. All right. Thank
Hope
you.
enjoyed the conversation, y'all.
And have a good day. And hopefully, if you actually watch this, you are not depressed. You think about how you might be able to take advantage of the situation.
Actually, embrace it. It's going to happen, so you might as well enjoy it.
Have a good day.
You guys.